I have not added my sorry, that was my mistake, guys. Sorry for streaming dead air for a couple of minutes. This is Samir. I'm coming to you live from Atlanta. I'm traveling today on the road. Um, I'm on the road from Atlanta back to Washington D.C., where my parents live. Just a couple of quick things I wanted to share today about longevity. So longevity is something that has come up a lot. Um, People are talking about it and all kinds of things. I think a lot of that talk is sort of like, how do you know if you're going to live long? How do you know if my protocol is going to make you live long? Because we don't have studies to show that, and by the time you find out, like it's going to be too late. You're going to be dead, right? In order to measure those things, right? So anyway, there is an academic literature around centenarians, around people who live to be 100 and so on. Um, and maybe in another post, I'll get into that literature and why I think it's important and why I think it's not important. But I think we can also just look at our own lives, look at our own family, look at our grandparents, our great grandparents, if we knew them. Even if we didn't know them, we can do our research and make some conclusions. So today I wanted to share 3 stories with you, and each story has its own sort of lesson. The first story is about my paternal grandmother's brother. His name was Uncle Yusuf. We called him Uncle Yusuf. Actually, he died before I was born, to be honest. He did not make it to be a centenarian, but I think it's still an important lesson to consider. So Uncle Yusuf was a jovial man. He was a very happy man. People who remember him very fondly. And for the last years of his life, maybe 15, 20 years of his life, sorry, someone just texted me. Let me just make sure that's not someone here. No, it's all good. It's all good. For the last, say, 20 years of his life, he was taking care of his elderly mother. Okay, so that was it was his sense of purpose, and everyone who knew him knew that this was his sense of purpose. It was very obvious, right? Now, what happened is one day, of course, she was very elderly. He would have been maybe in his 60s. She must have been at least in her 80s. So after she passed, he lost that sense of purpose, and he was unfortunately unable to find another one. So what happened after she passed, he also passed soon after. So I think from that lesson, from the lesson of Uncle Yusuf, we can learn that having a sense of purpose is super important. And what I want you to do with that information is I want you to ask yourself, let's say you want to live to 100, you want to live a long life. Ask yourself why you want that, right? Go deeper than just the general level. So at the general level, say, look, I want to live for my family. I want to live for this. I want to live for that. That's not specific enough. I want you to spend time. I want you to go really deep into this. Make your goals, make your health goals, whatever they may be, and talk about why you want those things. What is it in your value system? What is your sense of purpose that is animating you? Animation means to breathe life into something, literally, right? What is breathing life into you? What is the sense of purpose for you, right? The second example we're going to talk about is that person's brother. So that person's sister. Uncle Yusuf's sister was my paternal grandmother, what we call Dadi in my culture, right? Now, she was a very interesting person. Some people probably called her like a witch. I mean, I think that's probably maybe they wouldn't use those terms, but she was seen as someone who knew a lot about many things, spirituality and other things, but also about plants and plant medicine. And, for example, the idea that Karela, which is bitter gourd, I think that's what it's called in English, is very good for the blood. And now you can go out in the store and you can buy Karela supplements, which are meant to be sort of blood thinners, right? So she knew all this. And when she got sick, I think she doubled down on that. She tried different plants. She tried maybe more vegetarian kind of a diet. And despite all that, she passed away relatively young, from an asthma attack. And I think the lesson there is that good intentions aren't really enough. You need to actually think, if what you're doing is not working, you need to have the skills to reevaluate that, right? Specifically inflammation. So asthma and many other diseases are very closely linked to inflammation. And what we now know is that many plant foods can worsen that inflammation. Actually, eating in general can worsen it, right? So if my Dadi were my client today, I would have talked to her about fasting. Can we do more fasting? Can we do more elimination diets? Can we even do a fully carnivorous diet? Because, for most people, meats will be far less inflammatory than plants. And of course, when you're eating a meat-based diet, you eat less often. You won't get as hungry as much, right? And every time you eat, you're triggering inflammation. So the lesson from that story is, A, be willing to question your beliefs, but B, when it comes to what we now know about the human body and aging, inflammation is, if not the enemy, is at least a big enemy. Okay. Now, the third lesson I want to tell is about someone who's still alive. He's not yet a centenarian. Hopefully, he will be soon. Basil, he's the thumbnail for this post. Basil is my 96-year-old tennis doubles partner. He's still thriving. He still plays tennis. And what I want to tell you about Basil is that sometimes he'll show up to the court with some bandages on his knee or maybe his foot or something like that. And when you ask him, because sometimes you'll see the wound and it doesn't look good, you say, man, you okay? He'll be like, yeah, it's fine, no worries. And then you sort of press and you say, Basil, it doesn't look fine. You want to tell me about it, what's going on? He said, what's the use in complaining? That's always his line. I'll complain, I'll feel worse, you'll feel worse. Who's going to benefit from that, right? This is also the same person who, whenever he sees anyone, stranger in the court, young, no, it doesn't matter if the person is 6 years old or 60 or another, there haven't been that many 90-year-olds in the court, but whether the person's 6 years old or 60, Basil is going to find a way to have a conversation with that person. And when asked about that, he said, look, that's just what humans do. Remember, Basil grew up at a time when there were no smartphones, there was no internet, there wasn't even TV when he was growing up, right? So how did people entertain each other? Well, they learned the art of conversation, which is something that maybe we've lost right now. So the lesson there is that positivity, so some people will hear that and they will say, look, he's just a good-natured person. I'm not like that. And I want you, if you find yourself doing that, I want you to catch yourself. I want you to really question that. Is that really what's going on? Or what I think is going on is that Basil is making a choice, right? Basil is making a choice every day to wake up and look at the glass half full. Basil is making a choice to make connections, right? Basil is making a choice to build and nurture relationships because it's what he sees as part of a meaningful life, right? So those are 3 stories that I hope are helpful. And let's just sum up the lessons very quickly. So when it comes to physical health, we need to, I think if we want to live long and healthy lives, we need to actually focus on inflammation. I think that's a huge tool, a huge driver of chronic disease. In fact, everyone would agree with this, I think. It's a huge driver of chronic disease. It's a huge driver even of acute disease. And modern tools like fasting, elimination diets, keto, carnivore diets can really help with that through pathways that we discuss in other videos, right? The second takeaway here is, and this is Basil's lesson, is really about the mindset, right? How do you change your mindset? How do you improve your mental health? By making a conscious choice to do that positive thing every day, right? You focus on what you can do and not what's wrong. So Basil, again, is an example. So a few years ago, to stick with tennis, he couldn't really do the overhand serve, like how tennis players serve over their head. He couldn't do that motion anymore, so he started serving underhand, and he didn't like it. He really didn't like it. But you never heard him. You could tell he didn't like it by looking at his face, but you never heard him complain once. Right? Never heard him complain once. And then the last lesson is the spiritual health lesson. Define your purpose. What is it that grounds you to this earth? What is it that animates you? What is that strong why that gives your life meaning and makes you want to live that healthy and long life, right? So those are some thoughts from me. I'd love to know what you think. What's your top tip for living to 100? Who in your life, who do you have stories of a grandmother who lived to 120 or whatever, maybe a grandfather? What did she do to make it that far, right? Who else in your life inspires you with their health and longevity? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.